Hey friends, so I've gotten, my book has been consuming my life for the past few years now, and especially the past few months. And I get stuck periodically, right? I've probably made like 3 or 4 videos about this at this point, and I'm not done talking about it, even though I might be repeating myself over and over again. But, my book, this particular book that I'm working on called Introspect, is especially torturous because it's so self referential. It's about digging into yourself and figuring yourself out. And like the act of trying to write it down and explain it to other people is even more difficult than doing it in my experience, because I have to articulate things that I had not previously articulated, and I have to, which when I do that, it reveals inconsistencies that I don't think are necessarily a problem inside my head. But again, this is like we can argue about this. But like when you make word, when you use take ideas from inside your head and then you try to convey them, and I think this is true for artists, true for musicians, right? You hear it or you feel it in some way that's richer than you can express, and when you try to express it, the expression is going to fall short. And when the expression falls short, you then feel self-doubt, because what if the way in which you express the thing is reveals kind of falseness and shoddiness in your own thinking? I think sometimes that's true, I think sometimes it's not. But there is something to the idea that you should just almost disregard whatever's in your mind and only deal with whatever is on paper, because only that which is on paper is proven, right? And you can't go to the market with something that's inside your head that nobody else can see or hear or taste or understand. That said, the funny thing is I was getting frustrated with myself about the book, and then I have been thinking about how do I express that frustration, or how do I, it's almost like as having written a book about this toolkit on how to introspect, the writing of that book has put me in a position where I get frustrated, and now it's like I have a real life case study / example that's so meta that I have to deal with. And how do I deal with that? It's like, okay, well, the stuff that I'm talking about in the book is supposed to help me. It helped me quite a bit, but not quite enough. And that last bit that needed to be dealt with is something that, if the book hadn't helped me with that yet, then the book's incomplete. And at some level, the book's always going to be incomplete, because no book can be complete, right? Even some of the greatest authors of all time have expressed frustration and, despair at how they were unable to articulate what was in their mind, what was in their vision. Like all art is abandoned, never completed. Nothing is ever fully satisfactory. And yet, so it's like this constant internal debate with myself about whether or not the book is complete enough. And I felt that until recently that no, there's still something missing, and I didn't know I was until like last night. And again, I say this now, maybe like a week from now or like a month from now, I'll be like, oh, I thought it was complete, but it's still not. But this does have the ring of truth to it for me, which is that it's about integrating your shadow. And again, what the fuck does that mean? What is a shadow, right? Like this Jungian idea about that which is within the darkness within yourself that you don't talk about. And I have this persona as friendly, ambitious nerd, very kind, very curious, very, even when I talk about ambition, it's very warm and expansive and inclusive. And yet, there is the thing that was missing from the book was the shadow, which is the cold, dark, painful, difficult parts of me. And I got frustrated with myself, and then I got angry with myself, and I realized that anger or contempt even, right, is the thing that I need to address. And I don't know if I'm going to get into it in this particular video. I did a thread about it yesterday that was kind of exhausting to do psychologically. I'll link to it. But I found myself drawn to the story of Kratos in God of War 2016, the latest game. And if you haven't played the game, I don't know if I should. I guess I should try and summarize it. Spoilers for a game that has been out for 5 years. In the first 3 God of War games, Kratos is this very angry, vengeful, destructive guy who wants to kill all the gods from Greece, ancient Greece. Like I think in God of War 3, like he's the son of Zeus, I think, and he kills Zeus in a fight, and then he kills himself, and that was the end of God of War 3. It's like just hatred and anger, like revenge for his family that was killed. And in God of War 4, he seemingly God of War. He's resurrected in some way, and now he has a son, and his wife has just died, and we learn about his wife in retrospect, right? Like she must have been a lovely person, a good mom, good wife, kind of sweet, friendly, tough. And Kratos, in the whole game, is about Kratos' relationship with his son and his relationship with his own past. And it's like he sees how the things that he does not. So Kratos in the fourth game, he's gotten older, he's gotten wearier, he's gotten tired, he's kind of depressed in some ways, frustrated in some ways. He's just kind of weary. He's all that death and destruction for what? It's kind of weary, right? And he sees his anger and other things about himself that he does not respect, does not admire. He's kind of ashamed of it somewhat. He sees it being passed on to his son. He sees it being reflected in his son. And that's troubling and worrying and sad, right? And he has to help his son become a better man than himself, right? And he has to do this without having been taught, right? He has to teach his son something that he wasn't taught. And that's so difficult. That's so, to learn to love in a way that you had not been loved, right? And, in the game, you start out using the Leviathan axe, which is Kratos' wife's axe. And at some point, he has to go somewhere, it's kind of an underworld, a belly of the wheel sort of thing. He has to go somewhere where the axe does not work. And he has to go back to his past and dig up the Blades of Chaos. Now, the Blades of Chaos are these flaming blades that he has been using in the first 3 games to fucking murder everything. And to him, in my opinion, he associates the Blades of Chaos with death and destruction and monstrosity. They remind him that he is a monster, or he was a monster. And I think Athena, the goddess in this game, is kind of like appears to him as like a vision, and you could see it. You could frame it as maybe it's just his subconscious talking to him and saying, you are a monster, Kratos. You have don't stop denying it in yourself. Like you are a killing machine. And Kratos is like, yes, I'm a monster, but I'm your monster no longer. And when he says I'm your monster no longer, he's talking to Athena. But I am reading this now as he's talking to his super ego. He's talking to like his the part of himself that is sort of like social reprobation. Is that the right word? Like this social regulation. It's just the shame and guilt. He's no longer going to be in service to that. He's done, right? And Kratos uses the Blades of Chaos to, he does destroy monsters and stuff, but he goes on a journey, and the blades, they kind of wrap around his forearms, and there's which scar him. He has these chains, these wounds around his arms, and he bandages them up. And at the end of the whole game, Kratos and his son Atreus, they go to the top of the mountain to spread their mom's ashes, the wife Faye's ashes. And Kratos decides that he no longer has anything to hide, and so he lets his bandages float into the wind. And it's like this kind of, you see him experiencing this relief, right, at letting the bandages go, at accepting himself. And I think that's Kratos integrating his shadow in a sense. That's how I'm choosing to read it. He is accepting that he used to be a monster, accepting that there is monstrosity in him, but he doesn't have to be the monster. He eats the shadow in a sense. And I feel like this is something that I have had to do with my own anger. When I was an angry teenager, that anger did not always serve me well. It was, violent and rough. I'm thinking now of Avatar: The Last Airbender and fire, right? And of the 4 elements. And how Aang is quick to use fire, and he burns his friend Katara, and then he feels regret and shame and kind of doesn't want to use it anymore. And then he has to learn to kind of integrate that and accept that and forgive yourself. And again, what I'm grappling with is you do need to forgive yourself when refusing to forgive yourself is a kind of punishment, like this moral theater. But if you can just forgive yourself at a whim like that at any moment in time, how do you know whether or not you have the right to forgive yourself in any given moment? How do you know you're not bullshitting yourself? And that's something I used to struggle with a lot. I'm still struggling with it, but less. I now think that there is a moral judgment that happens, and what right do you have to make moral judgments? it's born out of your own experience, and it's never perfect, and you just try the best you can at each moment in time, knowing that you may have to revise it later on. You may be wrong about it. You don't want to make any irreversible judgments, right? But that doesn't mean you abdicate the responsibility of making those judgments when they need to be made. And again, I might revise this later on, but I'm going to work on this in my book, and I do feel kind of excited at the realization that this is a thing that wasn't in the book before, that needs to be in the book now. And I'm excited, and I would love to hear your thoughts about Kratos and about Aang and about eating your shadows and Jungian stuff. If you have any opinions on that, I would love to hear it. Done.